Well, the relentless rugby calendar never stops. Weekend just gone. URC action potted around Ireland, Australia. Friday night we had Leinster beating Ulster 27-20. Connacht lost to the Bulls. Double scores, 14-28. Munster did beat the Lions 17-10. There is Champions Cup next weekend. So frontline Irish players like Caelan Doris and others will play 5 weeks in a row and more besides. Munster, Stade Francais is Saturday 5:30. Ulster, Toulouse, Sunday 3:15. Leinster away to Bristol on Sunday 5:30. Late kick-off on Sunday. And then Connacht Challenge Cup action, Zebre, 8 o'clock on Saturday. Other news just to mention briefly, Colm Keys had the story. McHale Park in Castlebar is going to host the URC game between Connacht and Munster next March. Munster have obviously had their Porky Queeve adventures, Leinster Croke Park, so Connacht are getting aboard the GAA bandwagon. Our focus is obviously Ireland against Australia, and our coverage of the autumn series in Indo Sport is brought to you by Energia, who sponsor rugby in Ireland at all levels. At grassroots there is of course the Energia AIL. They are the official energy partner to Leinster, Connacht and the Irish men's and women's teams. And you'll be aware as well of the Energia Rugby for All initiative, which very much supports inclusion, and are welcome to everyone of all abilities to participate in the game. To learn more about Energia's rugby partnerships and their exclusive home energy offer for rugby fans, you can visit energia.ie/rugby. Rory O'Connor in studio. Hi.
Hey, Joe.
And Ian Madigan is with us. Ian, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Joe. Good to catch up, Rory. Enjoyed your coverage over the autumn internationals. Well done.
Thank you very much.
So, Ireland 22, Australia 19. 8 points down at half time. Maybe I was in a minority, perhaps, but I always felt Ireland would win, and they duly did, courtesy of that Gus McCarthy late try. I think, Ian, that the thing here is, like, we're obviously a touch greedy now, and beating Australia is like a whatever situation at home for Ireland, for better or worse. I think that what we were looking for with the game on Saturday was, yes, a win, but every bit as much of as a win, a performance to just rubber stamp a reasonable month, and a performance that would allow, you know, everybody consign the New Zealand performance to ring rust, bad night at the office, whereas you can't now consign 28 handling errors and 20 turnovers on Saturday to rust. There's just a sense of, that's all very messy and unsatisfactory from an Irish point of view.
Yeah, I relate to that. I think there's no performance from the autumn internationals that you can say if we replicate that in the 5 Six Nations games, we'll win the Six Nations or do a Grand Slam. The reality is our basics throughout the autumn internationals just simply weren't good enough. You know, you look at set piece, our line out, and line out is far more important than scrum now because the ball typically doesn't come out of the scrum. Our line out largely didn't fire for various different reasons, but ultimately you either win the ball clean or you don't. We didn't win it clean enough on the weekend, same against New Zealand. And then other areas like basics again, and that's what I'd want Ireland to focus on going into the Six Nations, is getting those areas right. You know, catch, pass. You know, passing is still a skill. The quality of your passing is certainly a skill. Our work at the breakdown just simply wasn't good enough either. And then I suppose the broader picture, we certainly miss Sheehan, we miss Tyke Furlong, 2 world-class front row options. And it's not just what they offer around the set piece, it's around the park and being able to relieve pressure on our big ball carriers like Van der Fleer and Doris, because, you know, ultimately without Sheehan and Furlong, you can just man mark Doris and Van der Fleer and suddenly you're not getting over the gain line. But great to build out depth at hooker. We got a good look at the out halves, which is and building out depth there. But some concerns across the team. I'll stand by. You know, we just don't have enough speed in that back line. And I think that is fundamentally a big problem for us not getting penetration with our attack.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate and comprehensive. I think the speed thing is, I think Joe did a lot of what New Zealand did to Ireland at the World Cup. Obviously a game he was involved with as well, where they kind of don't engage the front up carriers unless they have to. They kind of stand up. I know Eddie was very critical of the way Australia defended against Scotland, but against Ireland, I think teams have realised that actually you kind of want them to go wide, because while James Lowe is a dangerous player, He doesn't have top end gas, and Matt Hansen is not a player with top end gas either, and isn't playing particularly well either in this window. So I think there's a template there for other teams to mirror in terms of playing against Ireland. Is like, you know, they need to go through you to be. When Ireland were at their best in 2022, they were going through New Zealand. It was all close to the ruck or down the short side, and they played those lovely little tight passes and would get through you before they played round you. You know, they now they're being forced to try and go round teams, and because they don't have a player with you know, Robert Balogun is the only player, and they were really interested in Robert Balogun for a while, but they obviously just didn't feel like he had enough of the other stuff, that the speed wasn't enough. And the wingers that we develop in Ireland at the moment are not, don't have that kind of Cheslin Colby, Curtly Arenza profile. They don't have, so you know, Ireland are missing that X factor, and without it, they're really struggling to break teams down. So they're reliant on their set piece, and then when the set piece is unreliable, like the 2 tries in the second half did come from the lineout. So when it works great. Yeah. And Goodman's menu of options is really, really good, and I think they can break teams really well with that. But if that fails, their unstructured play isn't great at the moment. You know, they don't counter-attack particularly well. They're quite conservative on counter-attack ball, and I think Osborne could make a difference there if they picked them a fullback. But overall, you know, I started the month thinking they needed a renewal, and I think that sometimes gets interpreted as just personnel, but I think it's the game plan needs to be refreshed and updated, because teams have been watching Ireland so closely because they've been one of the leading teams in the world. They've developed strategies. Some of the best coaches in the world have developed strategies to play against them, and Ireland probably haven't evolved. Their kicking game isn't good enough either, although some of the individual kicks were great at the weekend. I don't think their kick strategy is nailed on, and sometimes they're too proud of their attacking game to not just play to their strengths. At the weekend, they had a better pack than Australia. I think they could have just gone tight and beaten them up a bit, but instead they kept trying their patterns over and over again, and that was, Australia were happy to just watch them and then, you know, force them into corners and then force turnovers. So lots to work on, but they have fallen to a point where they can still beat three top 10 ranked teams in the world, and you know, they won 6 Nations this year while not being as good as they were. So they haven't fallen far from where they were, and I think they know what they have to do to get back to that level. But it's not going to be easy.
No, the big picture is still very healthy, and we're nitpicking to an extent, but that's understandable under the circumstances. Ian, to develop the point a touch further, Brian O'Driscoll was on T, and Simon Easterby came down for a pitch side interview. Now, Easterby in his answer didn't give much away. The question was more the telling part. So O'Driscoll basically said to him, you know, do you feel now teams have worked Ireland out a little bit in phase play? And his reading of it was, in the question, he said, you know, it looks to me like teams are looking at Ireland, they don't commit big numbers to the breakdown very often. They fan out and they watch Ireland do their thing, but they're kind of very calm almost in that scenario. And Ireland, you know, how many times did Ireland, for instance, run out of ideas in midfield and just they chuck it out to James Lowe and hope he can kind of grubber kick a ball and run after it and make something happen? And I have to say, I felt Scotland really did that against Ireland in the finale to this year's Six Nations. I was at the game, you get a good feel for it. Very few in at ruck, 13 if not 14 across the line at times, and just line integrity good. And actually, what are you going to do here, Ireland? And Ireland didn't do very much that day. Away to South Africa, they were obviously in defence, they shoot up and they kind of make decisions for you, so it's a slightly different challenge. But I think that template of how to handle Ireland in general phase play, I think other teams are starting to reach a consensus on how to do it.
Yeah, and I'd largely agree with Drico's comments, and I think it's one thing saying like we need more speed, but if we don't have the players, like it's like saying we need a better lineout. What taller guys can we put in, or guys who can jump better? Like, so we don't necessarily have the answers there. But like specifically on our attack, and you always try and put yourself in the opposition's position, and Joe has ultimately been able to manage the Irish attack when he was with New Zealand, and again with Australia, albeit not getting a win, but nullifying our attack, which is what we're talking about. I think when he saw the centre partnership of Henshaw and Aki, he would have been happy, and he would have gone, look, it's blunt force. We'll be able to manage that as long as we get bodies in front of those guys. They don't have speed on the edge, so we'll just manage them to the wide breakdowns, and then we'll go hard when we trap Ireland there. So if you're looking for answers of like how I think we can improve, like what options do you have? You could go with a ball playing centre. Like, we saw some bright shoots when Crowley went in there against Fiji, and what having an extra set of hands in the midfield gives you. And then the other option that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago is I personally think Osborne should be starting, and I'd put him in at fullback. And I would like to see Keenan tried on the wing, and I think that gives us a bit more speed. It would improve our kicking game. And I'd also like to see the backs integrating with the forwards better. Like, it is predictable what Ireland are doing. We get to the touchline, we play 9 through a pod of 3 forwards, 10 sitting out the back, 2 hard runners off them. If it's a ruck on the 15, typically we play through the out half. It's readable. And what Australia did was they didn't jump out of the line. You know, if the ball was in front of them, they went forward. And it gave the defenders either side of them read time. The ball would then move into the next channel. That player would move forward, give the players either side of them read time. And what I was hoping to see from the Irish attack, from the bright shoots from the South African game, where we got those 2 tries, where we had a bit of deception at the line and a back or a forward hidden in behind the pod and trying to create that soft shoulder. I think that's where we need to grow our game to. And then the other side of it is personnel. I'll come back to not having Sheehan, not having Furlong. Ultimately, you need to get quick ball. And the best way to do that is to find soft shoulders. That will create 2-second rucks. What gives you 3, 4, 5-second rucks is being wrestled to the ground when you're running directly at someone. We have to be able to find soft shoulders in the opposition's defence.
Yeah. And what happened to that period in the build-up to last year's World Cup where it was routinely being said about Ireland, well, the great thing about this system is man in possession has at least 2, if not 3 options, and all he has to do is pick the right option, and therefore it'll be borderline always unpredictable and hard to defend against. That seems to have gone up in smoke a touch.
In ways it has, but in ways it hasn't. Like, I think the reason why Farrell is so gung-ho on Prendergast is he thinks he's the best decision maker at the line, away from whether he's moving fast or moving quickly or whether he can be a threat at the line himself. He thinks if he can keep presenting 2, 3, 4 options to Prendergast every time on phase play, he'll pick the best one, which will find place.
So in other words, that's Sexton was integral to that old system because he was so good at picking right options.
He was. And Johnny was extremely high percentage. Like, you think back to that, like even just the last passage of play of that New Zealand game, 5 minutes it went on. No handling errors. Yeah. Now, I know we didn't score, but it was a fantastic piece of play at the end. I'd question our fitness as well. Like, when you're saying fitness, it's not just aerobic fitness. Can you cover a certain amount of distance in a game? Fitness is your ability to execute high on the phase count, whether it's catching a pass, throwing a pass, knowing what breakdown you've got to get to, wrestling in contact. And I was actually disappointed with Ireland's fitness throughout the autumns.
Is there any chance that it's not, okay, it's a kind of fitness. Is there any chance that they're just tired?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's going to hit at some stage. It's very hard to know when exhaustion hits. And like, you look at someone like Josh. Josh wasn't tired, and he was saying in the media, I feel good, I feel fresh. Maybe someone like Tadhg Beirne, he's going through, a bit of chaos down in Munster. He's captain. He's wearing that. He played, I think, 3 of the 4 games. Is he feeling a bit of fatigue, both mental and physical? And there's only so many times you can keep getting yourself up. And it has been a tough run from the World Cup to winning the Six Nations to a really tough South African tour. And yeah, the pressure on these guys is maximal.
Yeah. Ruud, if I had to guess for a theory, I feel they are tired.
Well, again, that's renewal, isn't it? It's kind of recognising that energy deficit and infusing the team with new energy. Whether it's, moving away from the high volume game plan that they play, which is very taxing and forces them into a lot of collisions, but also a lot of decisions and huge accuracy, which that level of concentration must be sapping. You've got players like Caelan Doris and Byrne who don't seem to be droppable. The Farrell doesn't want now I think he is in Doris's case. He's trying to give him as much captaincy experience as possible. Even leading the Fiji week, he wanted to make that to set Sam Prendergast up to succeed. Gus McCarthy as well, Izuchukwu, all those players that he felt that having putting them in with a serious team was the right way to get them in. But it doesn't seem to be affecting Doris, who seems to have an incredible level of endurance and fitness. But I think Tadhg Beirne is, although he had a bad game against New Zealand, he was good in the other games. He's also calling the line out for Ireland. so that's another stress on him. I mean, he has to go back to Munster this week, and everything's changed since he left. So there's this, I think, is Ireland are paying the price for the fact that Andy Farrell, and it's not a very high price because again they haven't fallen off a cliff here, but the fact that Andy Farrell treated the Six Nations as a continuation of the cycle, that's not new. This is just an evolution of the same thing, and they went through the Six Nations. Yes, Joe McCarthy, Jack Crowley came into the team, Calvin Nash too, but it does feel like they're running on the same gas as they were at the World Cup, and the game plan does look like they're operating on memory a little bit. Now, he would argue he's given 4 new caps this window. He's got 4 new members of staff, one of whom is the head of strength and conditioning, and Aled Walters. They didn't, Jason Cowman left before the South Africa tour. There was a bit of a window there where they do have a staff there, but Walters wasn't in, and he's very, very new. So there's and look, he comes from the Springboks, England. He's very highly regarded, so I think he'll get that right. But it does look like they're not as just free and flowing as they were, and that has to come down for it. So you got to tailor your game plan according to that. You've got to be able to take the pressure off yourselves. You've got to be able to kick when. And Prendergast, I think, took some very good kicking options during the game on Saturday that did change the dynamic, but it's an area they need to get better at. And even, as I said, there was a period against Argentina where Argentina were going nowhere and it wasn't going well for them, and they were at the edge of Ireland's 22, and they did something like 5 or 6 pick and goes. And Ireland actually looked like they hadn't. It's the kind of thing Argentina would have done in the 90s, and Ireland looked like they hadn't had to defend a series of pick and goes in that area of the pitch in their whole careers. And they made gains and they got energy off it, and Ireland defended it, but it just brought Argentina back into the game, and it presented a different picture to the opposition. And Ireland probably had to kind of readjust how they defended to make sure that they had bodies on the edge of the ruck. So you've got to keep presenting different alternatives to the opposition, so they don't. Ireland have become a little bit predictable. So maybe it's time to tighten up for 5 minutes, not sacrifice the rest of the game, but take them on in the fringes, force them to think about something different, and then go wide when they've tightened up. So I think too often now they're playing the same way without presenting alternatives. Like, they're always going for that wide pass. Well, they're expecting the wide pass. Why not give the short one?
Yeah. Ian, do you think they maybe have become a little bit too attached to their sophisticated game plan, which they love and has served them so well, that they're not mixing it up enough?
I think that point is really well made by Rory, and it can come back to like what you're practicing in training. Like practicing that kind of power game in training, it's not overly exciting. A lot of the time it's up against grab defense. It's hard to figure out, is this going to transfer into the game? Whereas if you're going with intricate plays and you're challenging the defense to make good decisions and they're getting it wrong, that's going to fill you with confidence going into a game. But 100%, if you can have a period in a game that you're going in and around the ruck, one pass power plays really accurate, it builds confidence in your carry game, your rucking game, and then the defending team has to adjust. Maybe they plug with someone in behind the ruck, their 10, 20, 30 tightens up, and that's all you need, because then suddenly you're out halves getting to the 4th defender, and then that's making the decision for the 13 or the open side winger far trickier.
Yeah.
And it's also, you got to adapt to the rules. Like, the rules of the breakdown have changed a lot over the last few years. If you win the space, and full credit to McRae at the weekend, he was incredible. I think he got 5 turnovers. And look, you have to be critical that we're not getting into the breakdown quick enough. But you also have to look at the rules and go, well, it's much more advantageous now for the poacher to come in, because you can't hit him particularly hard. Even the technique that you used to be able to use, like when I finished playing, you could still croc roll, you could still neck roll, you could just come in and whack the guy, and you'd get away with a lot. Whereas now there's a bit of indecision with the players coming in, because there's a potential of a yellow card or a red card or a penalty if you don't get it right. So you have to win the speed. So going wide gives the poachers more of an opportunity to get in. There's nothing like having those power plays where you're effectively nearly latching on the player. It's impossible. There's no space for the poacher to get in. And that frustrates the opposition, which, it's an 80-minute game.
Yeah.
Rory touched on it there. You got to manage your energy. You can't keep playing wide to wide, because if you do that and you get turned over, you're going to be exhausted when you're defending.
Yeah.
And that did happen to Ireland a couple of times.
Just on the passing front, you mentioned the passing not as good, Ian, and I'm always coming in here a touch influenced by whoever I'm watching the game on TV with, because they're chatting away and I'm eavesdropping, and you kind of watch through that prism a little bit. So on the passing thing, there's the 21 handling errors, and so we can all see that Finlay Bealham
28
28. Sorry, it was 21 against New Zealand. 28, we're going the wrong direction.
28,
Yeah.
21, 19, 17 and 28
Wow.
this window.
Okay, that's the opposite of ring rust. So, you can see the Finlay Bealham thing, you can see the drop balls, but I think Shane Horgan in particular, because he finished up with Schmidt and we're going to become the best passing team in Europe, like it irritates him when there's a backline move happening and the pass is not out in front of the man, the catcher, where it's like inside shoulder and he just has to check his run just a little bit, but he has to check his run, he has to reach back, he has to catch the ball, he has to get the ball back out in front of him, he has to throw the pass himself, as opposed to ball in front of him, barely off his fingertips and pass it on to the next guy. And that's been really, numerous times in the game he's like, oh, inside shoulder. And so they're not handling errors and they won't show up in the stats, but they are taking microseconds off the Irish attack. And if we're saying the game's becoming a little bit more predictable, the execution's going to have to be so much better then, and the decision making is going to have to be better, but also the execution, the speed of it all, and that's just not quite there either for whatever reason. And that's a really hard one to figure out why that would be the case.
Yeah, part of it can be what you're prioritizing in your training week and maybe what extras players are doing in and around it. But like on the reason why Shane and Rob would have said that is because that's their whole game. What quality of ball are they getting, or the person inside them getting? If you're getting a slightly poor quality pass, your focus goes from how can I beat the defender opposite me to I need to catch this ball, because without the ball you've got nothing. And there was multiple times through the series that you could just see that the player has gone from just focus on catching the ball, they'll catch it and they'll just ship it on, as opposed to thinking I can show the outside, beat the guy on the inside. And you think of like Crowley came on and straight away beats a defender on the fade of the pass. You can only do that if the pass is really accurate.
Yeah.
You think of like some of the passes that Prendergast threw out, like he got Keenan on the outside against Argentina to create a 2-on-2, and then off the back of that, Lowe gets on the outside. If that pass isn't perfect, you don't create that opportunity. So it comes down to are you putting the time in? Are you fit enough? And is there a focus from the coaches on
it? You'd be at a lot of the press conferences.
Yeah.
During the World Cup warm-up matches, when Lineout came up, it was, look, we'll sort this out. During the World Cup, it was a bit more, okay, this isn't good. We're doing everything we can to sort this out. A year later, what's being said about the Lineout situation?
Well, like externally, and we can only go off what we're being told. It's not being treated with a huge degree of urgency. It's kind of, they almost roll their eyes when you ask them about it, and kind of, you bring this old chestnut up again. And I think they would point to the fact that, like the World Cup quarter final, that they scored a maul try, and if Kelleher hadn't been held up by Jordie Barrett, they would have scored another. They would have won the game off the back of their line-out. But it was ranked very low in the kind of overall setup at that World Cup. And last weekend they do seem to be a team that gets an awful lot of lineouts. They had 24 at the weekend. Joe McCarthy said they ran out of options. They'd used their entire menu and they were making it up as they went along, because they're not used to having that many lineouts. So if you have 24, 5 might go. They would kind of budget for a certain amount going astray, but there's too much to my mind, and it goes back to the errors, and it goes back to the passing. And I wonder about the training standards and whether they're as high without Johnny Sexton as they were before. And I'm not saying the line or anything with Johnny, but there does seem to be a higher threshold or tolerance for errors than there ever was in the setup over the in the 3 or 4 years before, because stuff. You can't really dismiss, like, whatever Finlay being and dropping the ball once, dropping it twice is pretty poor. Hugo Keenan just being dispossessed in contact, that's poor. And then players not knowing their drill and the line out, not getting off the ground. That stuff it's very much below what you'd expect for players of this level, players that we know can do much better things. I'm told that there's not like a Devon Toner style line-out nerd who has kind of inherited the passion and love for line-outs that O'Connell had in there. That they're all really good second rows, and they all have incredible strengths, but no one is an out-and-out line-out forward. And I think Ireland do pick their pack because of their skills, their skill set, and their skills in as much as their set piece ability. Like your props obviously have to scrummage, but they also need to be able to pass. There's been props in the provinces who've been very good scrummagers who haven't got anywhere near the Ireland squad because they're not able to throw a circle pass. And at line out, I don't see an outstanding Devon Toner style forward out there that they're missing, that they're leaving out. But at the same time, there's no one that in there who is just obsessed by the line out, and they're maybe relying on O'Connell to come up with that. But yeah, I don't think things have improved. And if things haven't improved, then you've got to look at the players and you've got to look at the coach who's responsible for that in Paul O'Connell and ask why it hasn't improved. And so far, certainly publicly, you'd imagine they're considering like something like 70% of their tries come off the line out. They need to get it right, and it needs to be better. And their defensive line-out needs to be way better as well, because they're not winning enough ball off the head. They're not putting enough pressure on the opposition either. They're getting close, but we keep hearing that New Zealand and South Africa have the best defensive line-outs in the world. Well, do you not aspire to have that mark yourself? Do you not want to have the best line-out in the world as well as everything else? So, I don't think O'Connell's under pressure for his job, and I know we're all always accused of going too easy on him, but I just don't see why. I don't see that being the way that things work. Yeah, I don't think sacking O'Connell is the way to go, but I do think they need to fix it, and they need to fix it urgently. If they want to defend their Six Nations title and they want to beat England and France and Scotland, the three teams that probably can beat them in the next window, then they got to get this right, and they've got to fix it very, very fast.
Yeah. It's an ongoing situation. That's
I think on that, like, there's a lot said there, Rory, and I'd agree with the majority of it. Like, the reality is the line-out's just not good enough. Like, it hasn't been. And we're talking about how are Ireland going to be able to win the Six Nations. You're not going to be able to win the Six Nations unless the line-out gets sorted out. So, like, why is it not working? Like, is the system, like, Paulie's obviously, fantastic guy and a brilliant coach, but is the system that he's trying to implement too complicated for the players that he has there? Does he need to adapt the system to simplify it? Because when you look at the mistakes, like and obviously, look, I'm not a line-out technician. I don't claim to be. But if you're looking at the mistakes, it's hard to pinpoint one thing. Like, the throwing's not good enough, the lifting's not good enough, the movement's too slow. But it does look like there's loads of different mistakes.
Yeah.
And what that could be is that there's just loads going on in the players' heads. They're thinking of too many things. Maybe it needs to be simplified. And even like Joe McCarthy's comment there of saying, like, we got to the end of the menu. Like, your rugby players, figure out a way. Say to the line-out quarter, look, I think I can beat my opposite guy on speed here, or maybe we need to go to a 5-man here and just simplify it, win the ball at the front. But it just, maybe they're too tied into the system and being answerable to the system and not being reactive enough to what's in front of them.
I do think they've simplified it to a degree already, and that's why they're going to the front so often. But that's one of the reasons their attack isn't as good as it used to be, because they're attacking off the front of the line out all the time. So they're relying on Gibson Park to deliver a worldie of a pass to get them going, and the tail gunner is already right on top of the first receiver, and their time and space is being cut down because they're not being able to trust. They're such a better team. The few times they've gone to the tail and gone off the tail, you can see it in the stadium. There's just a momentum to everything. Oh, absolutely. You're looking at someone like Ryan Baird, who has developed himself into one of the best defensive line-out players, certainly in the country. Week on week for Leinster, he destroyed Munster's line-out last Christmas. He's gone after line-outs. He has the capacity, the athletic ability to do it. If I'm Ryan Baird now, I am, and he's just had a bad window because he got knocked out in the Argentina game. But I'm going, okay, my point of difference should be I turn myself into the line-out nerd. He's young enough, he's clever enough, he's a smart fella. He needs to, in my opinion, to take ownership of this in his own head and go, because he's calling Leinster's line out now, certainly when Ryan isn't there. I think he can make that his point of difference, and he can make that, because Peter O'Mahony did it. He's physically got way more gifts than Peter O'Mahony in terms of he's taller, he's springier, he's more athletically explosive. He's only 25. He's got a chance in my mind to do that if he grasps that nettle, and someone's got to do it for Ireland. It can't just be on the kind of senior players that are there, and it doesn't seem to be working for those players. So if you want to get into the team and you've got the athletic stuff going for you, I think someone like Baird is perfect to go take ownership of this and come into the Six Nations window going, I'm going to fix your line out for you. and work with O'Connell to do that, and that would be his point of difference. But right now, it doesn't seem like anyone's doing that. That it's almost falling on Ty Byrne, who's already got a lot going on. I think Henderson got selected ahead of James Ryan during the World Cup because the line-out wasn't working. It just seems like the existing players who are there are struggling with it. I don't know if Barrett is the answer. I don't know if he's going to be capable of doing it. But I just think if someone of his profile that can't get into the team currently, that's your route, because he's got everything else. And Ireland do need. As you said, they want to refresh things. There are ways into the team, I think, and that's one way for Barrett to do it.
Ireland were 19-15 down with 15 minutes to go, and Casey and Crowley were launched together. Gus McCarthy, Healy came on 2 minutes after that. So Gibson Park has sort of acknowledged his body and his fitness not quite where it needs to be at the moment. He's off the back of an injury, and so he's not quite 1,000,000%. But I dare say, come Six Nations time, he'll get back to where it can be. But Casey has had a very good November and seemed to play very well again when he came on. And then Crowley in his 15 minutes showed that whatever disappointment he may or may not have been nursing during the week, or whatever dent to confidence other players may have suffered through the kind of experience of this November, he is mentally very, very strong. He showed as much in the Argentina game off the back of the New Zealand game, and he came on with 15 minutes to go after Prendergast had done perfectly well, and he did not look like a guy who'd been shaken by the experience. And I thought, it's easy to start with Prendergast, Ian, and we'll get to him. I think you have to say to Crowley, that is really good stuff to come on and play the way you did, given everything.
Yeah, I was delighted for him because I really felt for him with selection. The game did suit him. It was breaking up. Both teams were getting fatigued. We needed someone at out half to be able to challenge the Australian defence, and he did that. Also, showed technical nous, like that grubber kick he puts through that ultimately leads to the try. Like, that's a brave decision. You're kicking possession away 22 metres out from the opposition's try line. You want to come up with a play, and he certainly did that. I was in the stadium, so I got to see his body language coming on. He was coming on, barking orders straight away. And it was good to see. And look, while it was a challenging few weeks for him, will this experience ultimately make him a better player? I think it will. And I'm really excited to see him play for Munster now in the Challenge Cup. And he'll end up being a better player for this experience. But I'll go back to what I said last week. He just needs to focus on being the best version of Jack Crowley. He doesn't need to try and replicate what Sam Prendergast is doing. They have different styles of play.
You'll be shot for saying Munster in the Challenge Cup, being the
Champions Cup.
Things are bad. They're not that bad.
Are they even in the Challenge Cup? And what about Prendergast then? You watched him for 65 minutes in person.
Yeah, I was impressed with large parts of his game. The great thing about a game like that, where you're coming up against world-class opposition, that is when you get to really find out about a player. And look, his decision-making at the line certainly stood up. The variation in his game, Rudd mentioned it there, like the couple of crossfield kicks, a couple of the up and unders, albeit maybe a couple slightly long, but like the airtime he was getting to give the chaser a chance was very impressive. But it also shows up areas that you need to work on. And look, his style of play, he ultimately doesn't really challenge the line. He's more of a decision maker.
So you mean by that the way the way Crowley rather can step inside someone or beat a man? When you're talking about challenging the line, you're talking about as a running threat.
Yeah, exactly. And at 6'4", you're at high risk of being held up in the tackle, a mauls created, or really slow ball and a turnover. So when he does go for the break, it needs to be really on. And he actually showed reasonable speed when he chased back when Australia got that intercept, but he doesn't have the same step and acceleration that Crowley would have.
No.
And then, look, he came up with a few big defensive plays, but he also slipped off a good chunk of tackles, especially in the first half. Now, they didn't end up in, resulting in a whole lot, but he's going to be challenged there. Teams are going to try and find the path of least resistance, finding his channel high on the phase count to get him one-on-one. His tackle selection is going to have to be crucial going forward. But look, it was a really, really good performance, and he had a huge amount of involvements in that game. And I'd say he's really feeling it afterwards. And I expect him to be rested this week. I think it's been a long run of games for him between, the A Tour or the Emerging Ireland Tour, and then his involvement through autumn, to have a short turnaround leading into the Champions Cup. I expect him to be maybe rested this week, and then they might give him a start against Clermont, who are much weaker opposition, and he can build off that.
Yeah. Well, these are interesting words. Rested, dropped, rotated. Andy Farrell was talking about this post-match, and so no surprises. He's not loving the way we're all talking about this dynamic at 10. And I can see that. They're young players.
He set the tone.
Yeah.
He said, like, loads of this. I mean, I know it's been attributed to media hype.
Yeah.
Most of the hype has come from Andy Farrell.
Okay.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, it's fair. It's fair. He has. I mean, a lot of us have taken early. Geez, he's really talking up Prendergast. Has prompted further discussions, and then ultimately he picked him. So he's not happy with the talk of droppings as such. So he's saying, Jack gets it, you know. So when you guys, that's Rory and his mates in. When you guys feel like he's been dropped, he's not been dropped. And when you guys feel like he's pissed off, he's not. He's a team player and he gets the bigger picture. My conversations with the three fly halves is that I wanted Sam to play unbelievably well, so Jack responds and Fralls does as well. And then he used the parallel of Henshaw, Aki and Ringrose. And he said, have I ever dropped Bundy or Ringrose or Robbie in your eyes? No, it's rotation. It's good for us in moments when somebody's played a lot of rugby, not enough rugby, or to freshen up the team, etc. So that's how he's framing this 10 situation.
I don't think that's how the players themselves will frame it, and I know the coaches never liked the word dropped. I mean, no one led with the headline "Crowley dropped last week." You know, it was all
Prendergast gets the nod,
yeah, and it's the 10 jersey is the iconic jersey in Irish rugby. It's important. Crowley did enough to suggest he's going to play in the number 10 jersey many more times for Ireland, and he will also play in the number 22 jersey and have a really important role. Maybe even in the number 12 jersey for Ireland. I'd like to see them play together sometime and see how that worked out. Crowley definitely has the physicality. Maybe Prendergast's defensive weakness means you kind of do have to have a bodyguard beside him, a Bundy or Robbie Henshaw. But it's been a fascinating month, this whole thing. I suspect Prendergast is a nose ahead going into the Six Nations, but he can only stay ahead by playing games. I understand why Leinster would rest him this week, although I'm not sure what message that would send, and I would imagine he's marching into UCD tomorrow when they start training again going, what do you mean I'm rested? Yeah. I'm the best player in Ireland. I'm the Ireland number 10. I'm starting this week.
Dropped, rested or rotated?
Like, you know, I'd say Andy Farrell would like to see him keep playing. Okay. And Leinster's instinct, I think, is to mine players, whereas I think Farrell would much rather, you know, just see him play back to back to back. I think we all want to see him play in Thomond. I want to see a shootout. I mean, that would be tasty. And I heard, you know, the word in the street is that it's been tasty in training, and I think that would be.
Tell us more about the
just little nuggets that between the two of them that's been, you know, the rivalry is carrying over into training,
right? And
that again, like, as long as it doesn't get to the point where they're not talking to each other in the bus, it's healthy. Like, Jack Crowley played better in that 15-20 minutes last weekend than he had done in the rest of November, because he knows he's under threat, like, and he's responded to that really well. And now Munster because, like, I had a little look back on the 2 games he played in South Africa before he came over. I mean, he was terrible in those 2 games. Like, he was out of form coming into this window. He looked like he'd lost a lot of confidence and came in, and the New Zealand game didn't go well. He responded in the first half against Argentina, and then it kind of got away from him. And then he lost his shirt, the shirt that he'd owned all year, and the response was so positive. And that's exactly what Farrell wants to see. And I think if Crowley plays more minutes and plays better than Prendergast over the next 2 months, then he will get back into the number 10 jersey. But if Prendergast goes off and leads, you know, a backline full of Leinster players to, you know, big wins, you know, gets the better of him in Thomond Park and gets like 6 or 7 more games, then he's in a really strong position to go and do this. So It's all about, like, no one's saying that, you know, Jack Crowley should head off and take a contract in Japan. Like, he has a huge role to play. For all he isn't done yet either. Like, if he can fend off Prendergast and play in all these games, well, he marches into camp in January and says, "Hang on, I'm still here. I'm still starting for Leinster. You picked me ahead of him."
And
so
he sort of is man in possession at Leinster, Frawley. Just about, is he?
Just about, but I think because Prendergast played either side of the emerging tour, he could say that, you know, he's played 2 games as well. And the Ross Byrne played last week, and they just went up to Belfast and beat Ulster in you know, a stronger Ulster team in terms of more players available. So Ross Byrne is going, well, I'm still here.
There's rumours he's been linked with a move mid-season to France.
I don't think it's mid-season. I think it's the end of the
season.
End of season,
okay.
yeah. His contract's up, and Montpellier and Leicester are interested. And I suspect he will take that as well, because he knows, he can see the way the wind is blowing, but he's not going to give up his Leinster jersey either. So
can you paint more pictures for me of what tasty in training looks like?
Not really. No, I haven't heard, but I haven't, like, I can't come in and tell you that Jack Crowley decked Sam Prendergast in training last week, but I just
clip.
Yeah,
take the end of that, clip it.
Well, like, I don't know, Ian can probably tell us more about what it's like when you're kind of going for the one shirt. Like, it's like, of course it's going to get that way, because that's your chance. Like Crowley I think Ian alluded to on the pod last week, when Crowley ran over Harry Byrne in the URC semi-final, it was such a statement. That's why I want to see this Thomond Park game on the 27th. I want to see the two of them go at it and see whether Crowley thinks he can physically dominate Prendergast and how Prendergast responds to that.
I've heard you call for this about 10 times now.
I know.
It's like...
Well, we want to sell our sport, don't we? Like,
no, we do. We do.
The viewing figures will be good.
They will be good. So...
Just on Joe, on the getting tasty in training, like.
Oh, okay. Why don't you weigh in with more speculation?
Yeah, look, you here.
Yeah.
There's lots of things you can do. Now, majority of the time when you're in training, whether it's the big session on the Tuesday or the Thursday, it's not full contact. There may be 5 minutes of full contact, but you just simply can't do that now. The game is so tough on the body, but it is what they call grab. So you have to effectively stop the player, but you're not tackling to the ground. So they call it body in front. But that has a wide range of level of contact in it. So you can step over the mark. If you get the opportunity to hit your opposite 10, you might just go a bit more on the full contact side than the body in front side. And then it's also how you cue the other players around you. Like if I was coming up against, for example, Johnny in training, I would have the back row absolutely chomping at the bit. You know, I'd be handing out the caffeine chewing gum before training, going, "Guy, I need you to get up in his face, take away his time to make a decision." If Johnny was to do a show and go through, I'd have to weigh in on the guy who missed him. Like, man, stay on him until the ball is gone. And then there's also, you know, you'd have a good idea of what plays the first team are running, and you're supposed to be, you know, somewhat in the dark if you're in the second team. But look, you know the plays because you're on the bench, and you can try and predict them and shoot out of the line and shut it down and make their attack look less fluid than it should be. And that can frustrate the 10 who's in possession, make him try and force plays, look a bit out of control, and all those little small things accumulate. And then you can also, when the opposition make a mistake, you can be, you know, shouting and hollering about it, saying how well your team has done, you know, and that builds atmosphere if you're in the second team or if you're in the starting team and you're doing that and you're trying to portray to the coach that you're the one who's more in control and you've got a more cohesive team because you're the one who's leading it. All those little things do accumulate.
I need to reread that Sexton book and find the chapter where he got sick of you doing that.
I'm sure it's in there somewhere.
Yeah. So drop Jordie Barrett in. How does all this work?
I genuinely don't know. Like, I'm fascinated to see what Leinster do this week. Like, Barrett is back from a knee injury. He said he did a little video with Leinster Rugby today, and he said his body's feeling good. So he was running water up in Ravenhill on Friday night, and he, I presume, was coming into contention this week. Osborne, I think, is still injured, and that's a shame for him because I really think he's been one of Leinster's best players this year, and I think he's really essential for Ireland getting better in the new year. But he's the one that you like most obviously think was going to miss out. I mean, Barrett's so talented; he can play anywhere apart from 9 and across that back line. So they have scope to fit him in. I don't know what, you know, whether the plan is to play him at 23 and bring him in to kind of ease him into his Leinster career. Bristol are a good team. It's not going to be a gimme, but the Champions Cup pool stages are not as a bit like the Champions League at the moment. You can throw one or two if you need to, or not that you're throwing one by giving Jordie Barrett a debut. So I suspect we might see him start right wing. Or maybe they start him a fullback and they shift Keenan to right wing, like we talked about with doing with Osborne. I don't see them breaking up Robbie Henshaw and Gary Ringrose for an All Black. I can't see either of those guys dropping out of the Leinster team for Jordie Barrett, as good as he is.
I presume the one thing that can't happen is Jordie Barrett spends the next couple of months playing 10. Like Andy Farrell would literally march into UCD, kick down the door and say, what the hell is going on here? That is just...
All four of them would leave.
like
someone's going to end up... Like, I was thinking right wing, but Jimmy O'Brien is back and he's playing well, and Jordan Armour's had a good season. They're both Ireland internationals as well. They weren't involved recently. Like I'm talking about moving Hugo Keenan, who's Ireland's fullback, but I don't know. Ian, what do you reckon? I can't see where they fit him without annoying someone.
First of all, he can't play 10 in, correct?
No, not necessarily. I think
politically, I mean.
Yeah, I think initially, do I see him playing out half while he's learning Leinster's attack and defence and getting cohesive with the other players? I certainly don't think we'll see him at out half this week. Will he play at out half at some stage over the course of his contract? I do think.
But if Leinster went to big games with him at 10, that is Irish rugby shooting itself in the foot. That's crazy. No,
it is, and it wouldn't surprise me if there was some sort of asterisk in that agreement with Leo that he's not played at out half.
Okay.
But
or centre or fullback.
Well, he has to be on the bench. No, I think Rudd's comment on having him on the wing, like when you're on the wing, you can obviously. I think Leinster are going to go after Bristol early. You know, it's a good area to go after them. Play the territory game, force him to play from deep. He fits really well into that game plan. Have him down the right. He's phenomenal in the air. Really tall guy, very athletic. Moving forward, then it depends how other players are playing. You know, so at 12, I think he offers a huge amount to Leinster's attack. So the two positions that I would have him would be at 12 or on that right wing, and it just turns Leinster's backline into a real physical, nasty backline, which will make a big difference.
Okay. Well, we'll watch that with interest. So they're Bristol 5:30 on Sunday. Just to round off with because this, you know, there's a kind of slightly negative slant to a lot of the conversation. It is worth acknowledging 3 wins out of 4 is still reasonable. Debutants across the board: Gus McCarthy and has Sean Prendergast, so much more game time than predicted, and has Sean Clarkson got a debut. Izuchuku got a debut. Stockdale back in decent form, albeit the injury unfortunate. Osborne in his 27 minutes further underlines the case. He's a real contender at international level, which is great, and he's versatile. A new captain has been seamlessly bedded in Caelan Doris. You know, there's kind of plenty here, which is, if this is their dip, if this is their World Cup into 27, that little bit of stagnation or dip, geez, it's not a low one.
We are judging them by the standards that they set themselves, and we are coming into this expecting them to be, if not the best team in the world, the consistent force that we saw in 2022 and 2023. They're in an infinitely better place than most of their rivals.
Yeah,
they're just not the Springboks right now. You know, there's only one team really that is consistently performing across 2024. The team of the year, without doubt, is South Africa, and Ireland did beat them over there once. But I think South Africa, being a much more consistent force, are probably further along the line a year out from the World Cup, having won the World Cup, than anyone else has been. I think France are coming back strong. I don't think England have fallen that far. I think they'll figure that out, but they've got too many good players to do so. But really. And New Zealand finished strong without really impressing at all over the course of the year. That's they're still a top 4 team, and they're finishing the year ranked second in the world, and they've won 2 games against rugby championship opposition without playing particularly well in either of them. They're still brilliant. They're still a magnificent team. They're just not playing particularly well, and they're making too many errors, and they've got a couple of things they need to figure out. They're not simple things to figure out, but I think we can point to what they are. And look, there's far more intelligent rugby people than me in that setup who will do that. I guess the risk factor is that the head coach is heading off on. He doesn't like the term sabbatical. He definitely doesn't like jolly, but he's becoming the Lions coach today, and he is the alpha in that group. And the assistants are picking up the pieces when he's gone and trying to keep the show on the road. So that's going to fall on them and the playing group. So is there a further reversion to the mean at the start of 2025? Maybe, but then a large group of these players will go off in the Lions. Farrell will return from the Lions with new ideas, having been refreshed. They'll have given a load of debuts in the summer of 2025, and you would suspect that in the autumn of 2025 we will see the team start picking up again. This is the if you're looking at a dip, this is the time in a World Cup cycle to dip.
Yeah.
You want them to be coming back up like they did in the last World Cup cycle in November 2025, really start looking good in the Six Nations in 2026. Really good summer, really good November in 2026, and then you're into a World Cup in 2027. If you're designing it, that's what you want to do. The concern is they haven't refreshed the team that much in this year, that they look like they're still suffering a lot of the issues that they had at the start of the year, at the end of the year, that they maybe haven't improved as it's gone on. But certainly it's not doom and gloom. It's, they used to be the best team in the world. They're not quite the best team in the world anymore, and we're wondering how they get back to being the best team in the world. That's how I'd frame it.
So that's our rugby for today. Coverage of the autumn series in Indo Sport is brought to you by Energia. And again, energia.ie/rugby is where you can read more about their rugby partnerships.